Okay, go ahead and title your notes today energy. So, very broad, starting very, very broadly. I want to teach you a law about energy. Very important law, in fact. It's going to kind of serve as the foundation for our discussion here. And that is the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, so what this law says that entropy, fancy word for disorder, must increase. Now, this second law of thermodynamics applies to both small systems and large systems. So, if you ask physicists, what will be the fate of the universe? Many of them will tell you that what's going to happen is the universe is going to die a heat death. In other words, the whole universe will eventually just be the same temperature. And if the whole universe is the same temperature, it will have cooled off in effect, and then life can't persist. There's no more stars. There's no more energy, right? It's all just kind of evened out. And that's the process we're talking about here. It's this process of order to disorder. So let's just generally say that nature favors uh, going from order to disorder. All right, let me give you a funny example to illustrate this. That this process going from order to disorder is like it happens naturally, we could say. So here's the example. Your room at home. What is the tendency of your room, your bedroom? Is the tendency for it to go from being ordered to disordered or disordered to ordered? Like, what is it just naturally doing? You got to fight against it, don't you? So your room naturally goes from order to disorder. In other words, you have to work. We're going to underline work, which means we got to spend energy if we want to go the opposite direction. So we got to spend energy to go from disorder to order. That would be the reverse of the process, right? So this right here, this disorder to order, that's like the reverse of the second law of thermodynamics, right? We're going the opposite direction. So that's going to cost us energy. It doesn't really take any energy for your room to just become more cluttered, right? It just kind of happens naturally. So this is where I want to take this now in the direction of life, like living things, because it's fascinating. This is actually what helps us distinguish a living thing from a non-living thing, is how it deals with energy. I would have loved to have brought this back to our discussion on our first day of class with Is It Alive? Remember that activity? So it would have been great if we had known this, but we didn't. But when you really think about it, death, right? What occurs in death? I'm not going to answer that question. I want you to answer it. What occurs biologically to something that's like dead? Decomposition. Okay. Say a little more about that. Like what's happening to the molecules and yeah, and in terms of order and disorder, are we going from which direction are we going? What do you guys think? Decomposition is characterized as order to disorder or disorder to order? Is it becoming more disordered or more orderly when it decomposes? we're thinking about like a dead plant or something. Okay, you don't have to go morbid on us and think about humans. I know you probably were. All right. It's not a trick question. It's should be pretty obvious that decomposition. So we're starting with something that's alive. We've got structure. We've got order. The cells are together. These circles can be cells. They can be molecules. I don't really care, but because it's just a illustration. But we've got order. And after death takes place, the molecules or the cells, if however you want to think about them, they become scattered, broken into smaller pieces, and they become disordered. And by the way, this process releases heat, which is energy, right? Say it's energy, releases energy. So that's cool, right? All right, so we got a good picture there of what death looks like. Let's think about what life looks like. In fact, let's start with a snail embryo. Okay. How many cells let's just talk about a human. How many cells does a human start with? Shout it out, you guys, if you know. I need two cells. Yeah, sort of. Yeah. Yeah, the textbook would tell you it's one, right? You got the fusion of the sperm and the egg, but the sperm cell doesn't actually become. It's not as though the sperm and the egg cell become two cells together. They don't fuse together. Instead, what happens is the sperm cell basically puts the chromosomes into the egg, and then the egg develops from there. So we all start as a single cell. And then that single cell, right? Actually, let's think of these as molecules. Okay. Think of all the molecules that have to come together to form life, right? You got to have all these molecules joining up to produce order. And so you can think of this orderly embryo here is developing. So you could think of this as like a snail embryo or something. Now, so this process of life, right, forming, life developing, is exactly the opposite of decay and death. So here we've got disorder, molecules scattered all around, right? In fact, the molecules that make you, those molecules came from all different locations. My lunch, right? My breakfast, all of the stuff that I eat, those molecules are from far away. And then what happens is I bring them together and I order them to become part of my body. So you got this disorder to order. It's the reverse of death. In fact, if you played like a video like if you had like a time lapse and you played it in reverse, it would look like a dead plant would rise from the dead or something. Like it would look like the opposite, right? So you've got order to disorder. In terms of the energy, what we're talking about here is we're talking about energy coming in. So this requires energy. It requires energy to go from disorder to order, whereas with death, going from order to disorder releases energy. So energy is consumed in order to build up or grow an organism. Now, this should be intuitive to you because you guys are all teenagers and you're growing a lot right now. And so you're probably eating like insane amounts of food, I'm assuming. I remember I did when I was in high school. I ate like just a crazy amount of calories because especially when I had my like growth spurt my sophomore year, I ate so much food. The reason for that is you need that food in order to build and grow the body. Because again, you're going against entropy. So if you want to, you can say against entropy here. And then over here, you could say you're going like with entropy. So just a couple like kind of funny ways to summarize this. You could say like, we need to be constantly eating in order to keep our body from falling apart. Or you could say giving way to entropy would be another way to say it. Now, even when you become an adult, like my body weight has stayed about the same for the last like 8 years probably. But I've been eating food for the last 8 years and I haven't gained a single pound. And that's because the energy that I'm taking in all that energy just so that I don't fall apart. I know it sounds weird, but that's literally why I'm eating. I'm not eating to gain weight. I'm not growing anymore, but I still have to eat just to keep my body together, to protect it against this tendency that it has toward falling apart, entropy. Because that's the direction things go unless you have energy to counteract it. Okay, so hopefully this is making sense. So I like to start with this lecture, because it's the foundation of everything we're going to learn now. Like everything else we learn is how the cells, it's like the details, but this is why. Like, your teachers probably haven't taught you why. Like, why do animals do cellular respiration? You're like, I don't know. I just have to memorize cellular respiration. It's like, but this is why. Like, this is why the cells do it. This is what's required to keep something living. You're fighting against entropy. Okay, so that's that. Let's look at a couple categorizations now. So let's start with metabolism. So metabolism, the definition of this is it's the sum of the reactions of an organism. Chemical reactions specifically, right? And one of the ways to think of a living thing is that you got energy constantly flowing through the organism. This is why you're constantly eating, is because you basically have like, right, if you want to just take a human, for example, you've got energy in as food, and then you've got energy out as heat, waste, and then maybe some growth, let's say. A little bit of growth, but mostly heat. So you look at this energy is coming in, you have to account for every single joule of energy and where did it go. Most of it is lost as heat, some of it went to growth, and then the rest was lost as waste. All right, so there's two different types of reactions. The first is catabolic, which it can be thought of as breaking down. So this is like what you do when you digest your food. So you're going from large molecules to small, and that would look kind of like this. Maybe you got a polymer, and the polymer is broken down into monomers. Energy is released during this process. So we're going to say that the reaction is exergonic, which literally just means releases energy. And the classic example of such a catabolic reaction would be cellular respiration. Is a great example. Right, and that's where you're going. You start with C6H12O6. It gets broken down, and you release a whole bunch of ATP energy. So catabolic reaction. So you can probably guess what the other one is. Anabolic. Oh, actually, I forgot to show you guys. There is this way that you'll often see depicted, showing the energy of energy over time. So it's like an energy versus time graph. And so you'd be starting with a higher energy state. You'd have to overcome some sort of activation energy for the reaction to proceed. And then you would end with a low state. So you got high to low. And what this means is that you've released energy by dropping down, right? By dropping from a high to a low energy state, that means that energy has been released. In other words, low plus this equals whatever it was here in the high. So you could, I hope that makes sense to you mathematically, that if you took the low energy state plus the energy released, it would equal the energy of the high state. This plus this equals this. Okay, so that's catabolic reactions. What would an anabolic one look like? Anabolic is just the opposite. So this would be like building up, taking pieces and connecting them together to form bigger molecules. So it'd be going from small to large. And taking monomers, connecting those monomers together to form a polymer. So that's an example of an anabolic reaction. Plants are experts at anabolic reactions. So are animals. Any organism can do it. But the classic example that I think of when I think of an anabolic reaction is photosynthesis. Because as you know, that's called carbon fixation, right? They take the carbon molecules, carbon dioxide molecules, fix them together and form sugars. So that's a good example. From the energy perspective, this is the opposite, right? You're starting from a low energy state and you're ending a high energy state. And so, as you know, in order to get up this hill, we're going to have to put energy into the system. Energy in. Now, where does the plant get its energy to perform these anabolic reactions? The sun, right? Uses sunlight. That energy helps build up the molecules. Okay, so we got endergonic. So instead of exergonic, it's endergonic, which means energy in. Goes into the reaction. Or you could say energy is spent in order to build up the molecule. Why? Why does energy have to be spent? Because we're going against entropy. Remember, you guys, this is what we just talked about. Entropy, the second law of thermodynamics says that if you're going to go from order to disorder, that won't require any energy. It'll happen naturally. But if you're going to go from disorder to order, like we're doing here, we're going to have to add energy to the system. Add energy. So that's what we do. And then, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, no. Yeah, back in there is fine.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And you're testing, right? Are you doing okay? Yeah, you guys can like put in the earbuds if you want, if it's distracting. Or you could go to another classroom too. That'd probably be fine. Just let me know. Okay. All right, so we got the concept here of energy having to come in to build up the molecules. Example, photosynthesis uses energy to build big organic molecules from smaller CO2 molecules. So this idea of taking little pieces and connecting those pieces together, that applies to photosynthesis. It's kind of more complicated. It's not as simple as like connecting a bunch of amino acids in a chain, right? Photosynthesis has got a lot more steps and it's more complicated. And yeah, that's a lot of what you'll learn in this unit, actually. This when you look at the reading, you'll see what I mean. There's just this crazy amount of detail, and it's my job to help simplify it. Now, I'm going to make it simpler, and but anyway, you'll see those details maybe in 2 to 3 lectures from now. But right now, I just want you to have a good concept of the energy and how that, especially the second law of thermodynamics. I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to stop us here. And then what we'll do is tomorrow we'll do some notes on enzymes. Enzymes are molecules that help reactions proceed. You'll get some details on the enzymes. We'll look at the pre-lab because the first lab we're going to do is an enzyme lab. We'll look at the pre-lab, and then Wednesday, so not tomorrow, but the next day, we'll conduct the lab and go from there. So I am a little bit disappointed